Hey everyone, this is Gretchen with Kodable. I'm here with Brie Gray, our curriculum director, and we are so excited for the new school year. We're thrilled to have you all here, and we are excited to walk you through some of the changes that we've made to Kodable over the past year, but also to just, if you're new to Kodable, walk you through your dashboard, get you all set up, and make sure that you're good to go for the new year. So, with that, I'm going to let Brie take the lead.
Yeah. So we're going to start. We're going to dive right in and talk about adding your first class and setting your class up. And then we'll do a dashboard tour. We can show you some of our new features. We're really excited today. We announced our lesson library. So we have some exciting new lesson stuff to talk about. And then we'll talk about game updates and share some resources with you. So we'll dive right in here to setting up our first class. Okay, so we are going
From the top.
We're going to start again and talk about adding a class. So we will add our class, and again, we're going to name this webinar. So here is where you will decide the pacing that your students will be on. You can change this later, but this is how you'll manage the content that your students have access to. So if you want everything to be open for your students, you would do a K through 5 option. If you have a kindergarten class and you want them on our kindergarten pacing, that would be this option. So whatever grade level you choose will be the only content that they have access to. And we'll talk more about how you can manage what they have access to within that grade level, but only the grade level you choose will be what you have access to. If you want to import students in bulk, you can do that here. And if you have Google Classrooms, you can do that by clicking here. So let's continue. We're going to add myself and Gretchen as students to this class. So here you'll see that we've generated some options for class codes. If you have younger students, you'll notice these would not be easy to remember. So we actually have a tip of the week video that Gretchen will be sharing just on creating an easy to remember class code and going over some naming structures there. So I'm going to make our class code webinar for this class because it's easy to remember. We will continue. So this is where the grade level and the pacing stuff comes into play. So we used to have playlists, and I'm sure some of you remember that you loved that you could stop students from accessing things you have not taught yet. If you still want to use that feature where you only have students on the levels that you have taught the lessons for, you would click Assign Lessons manually. If you want everything open for a free play situation, you would click I want to assign all now. I will note again that whatever grade level you chose, when you say all, you're only choosing for that grade. So if you want everything, you would do K through 5. If you made a second grade class and you click all, that all only means all of the second grade content. This can be changed later when you click on Manage Class, which we'll get to, but for now, I'm going to do I want to assign lessons manually.
There you go. Can everyone see our cursor all right?
It's waving.
Okay, great.
So I'm going to go to our dashboard. So we're on the second grade pacing. These are all of the lessons that are aligned with second grade. This again can be changed later. So, the agenda. So as we talked about, if you want to change your pacing, say you decide you want your second graders to have access to some first grade stuff or some third grade content, you can go to K through 5 and you'll see that that changes what they have access to. And if you want to change how you're assigning levels, you can go to Manage Class and you'll see down here, you can assign all practice levels. And if you've already done that and you don't want it that way, you can unassign practice levels here. We're going to go back. So if you've chosen to assign levels manually, you'll do that directly from a lesson plan. So let's just click on our first lesson plan. And you'll see assign practice levels here. If you don't click on this and you've chosen to assign levels manually, your students, when they log into the game, will not have access to any lessons. So as soon as you click this, that will be what shows up on their devices. So we're going to start talking a little bit about the lesson plans since we have them up here. So all of our lesson plans are designed to follow a gradual release model. So that's the I do, we do, you do structure. So I'm going to open these tabs so we can see more in our lesson plan. And if you've never seen one of our lesson plans before, we'll look on the left. So this is where you'll see the name of the lesson plan. You can print directly from your teacher dashboard. Any materials, which you'll see listed here, you can download by clicking here. And again, you can assign the practice lessons. Here are the learning objectives. So in this lesson, students will be able to explain what a programmer does. Students will be able to move a robot forward, spin, and jump using basic programming language. If we click here, you'll see our standards listed, which we'll talk about a bit more, and you'll see vocabulary for the lesson.
So I'm going to pause for just a second because I'm getting some feedback that it's a little small, hard to see. So let's see if we can make this better.
Magnifier Command Plus.
Lizzie, can you get that?
Mm-hmm. This should improve things quite a bit for everybody. And let's see about our cursor here. Okay, I think that we have that. Yes, show cursor. Okay, so we should be all set.
Great.
All right, Brie, sorry.
No problem. Okay, so we will walk through the structure of our lesson plans. All of the Kodable lesson plans that are aligned with our game levels follow the I do, we do, you do structure. In a little bit, we're going to introduce our lesson library, which is more flexible. There are mini lessons, there are more free-form, open-ended. There's a lot of resources that are not following this structure, but for our lessons that are aligned with our standards in our game, they do follow this. So for direct instruction, this is where you'll introduce the programming concept, including all the vocabulary. And this is usually about 10 to 15 minutes long. After direct instruction, you'll move into a guided practice activity. This is either whole group or in pairs and usually has some materials. Like I said, they're all included here. Students will be working collaboratively and applying the concept off screen before they work on screen. So after the guided practice activity, which is about 20 minutes, students will move into the independent practice portion. So this is where they'll apply the concept completely independently. This is in the game, so students will get on the app or play at game.kodable.com and use that class code up here. This is our class code. Students will log in with that class code and choose their name from the class list to play and do their independent practice. And every Kodable lesson ends with an exit ticket or some kind of informal assessment. You can also assign practice levels at the bottom of each lesson plan.
Alright, I'm going to try our cursor one more time, guys. I've got all the settings clicked, so I'm not really sure what's going on. Okay. Love to see that.
Look on this, click on that. And then we'll go over to the, just click on this.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like right here.
Mm-hmm.
Just tell them what button, just specify what button.
Okay, so we're gonna just voice out what we're clicking on. I don't know. Okay, for anybody who is considering the Wirecast Play streaming service through YouTube, not gonna give it 5 stars. So we have it's supposed to be showing our cursor, but it's not showing up. So we'll have to do some troubleshooting if we want to use this again. But for now, we're just going to say like what button we're clicking on. And when we highlight it, it should change color or do some sort of action. Brie, if you're pointing to actual text, like if you can highlight it for them, that should help.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
We're actually
Sorry,
moving off of this lesson plan to the top of your page. So you'll see it should have just highlighted orange, My Classes, Lesson Library, Students, Progress, and Admin. So we're just going to talk a little bit about some of the tabs that you see at the top and what they do before we get into the lesson library, which we're super excited to talk about.
Actually, we had a question from Maureen. She asked, can you share students with another teacher? And so actually, Maureen, right now, that's just a Kodable school feature. So if you're a paid user of Kodable, then you have the option to create admins, and they can actually see, you know, all of the students and teachers within your school and set up classes for people and monitor student progress and all kinds of things like that from an admin level. But on the free version, it's not an option to link accounts and share classes with other teachers. So we do have that option. It's just part of our paid program.
Cool. So My Classes is where we started, and this is where you'll do anything to manage your classes. So you'll see we have a list of classes. I know you cannot see my cursor, so I'm hovering over the class names here, and I'm going to click under first grade on grade 1 just to show you an example. And this should look familiar because we saw this when we created our first class. I just want to show you how you can manage by clicking Manage Class. This is where you can add students, this green Add Students button. Transfer class roster if you want to switch this class roster to another class. So maybe you had a second grade class and they went to third grade and you want to move your first grade class now into second grade. You could do that by clicking Transfer Class and selecting where you'd like to move it. We're not going to do that right now. And here, this purple Print Parent Instructions button will download a handout for you to send home with a student code for each student so they can log in and practice at home. If you want to make any changes to the class, if you look on the right side of this page, you'll see Edit Class. Class name, you can change it anytime. Class code, say you think, you know, I6KVMZN is too hard to remember. You could change it there. If a new teacher is taking over the class, you could change the teacher here.
Again, this is part of the admin feature. So say I was an admin at my school, and right now I have it assigned to me, but I want to make sure that Miss Eatsam has access to her class. I could just change it to her and change the teacher. And then she could now access this from her teacher dashboard and view all of the students and all the student progress and manage her class from there. So it's really nice if you're setting up classes for other teachers in your organization to have that feature available to you.
And again, with this grade level option down here, if you change the grade level, it will change the pacing. So your students will have access, you and your students will have access to different material depending on what grade level you choose. And I know we mentioned before about assigning all practice levels at once, this orange button, and unassigning practice levels, and that's where you can manage if your students have, you know, a free-for-all situation where they can just kind of play through. You'd want to assign all. But again, if you want to assign from the lesson plan like we just talked about, you would want to do that manually. So we are going to go back up to the top of the page and we're going to click on Students. It should highlight orange. This is where you'll see all students that you have listed. You can filter by class to search for a student. You can just type a student into the search. You can transfer students. You can delete students. You can create new students by clicking the green Create New Student button and adding them to a class of your choice. You can print parent instructions or you can import an existing student. So if you have a student that already has an account, you would click Import Student and enter their code and name and select a class to add them to. Here we have the progress bar at the top, this orange progress button. When we click here, this loads the progress for all of your classes. So if you want to look at a class progress just per class, you would click this middle class progress view button. And you can select a class from your list. So let's see, who might have progress here? We'll look at Hour of Code. And we can see how far we are through the lesson plans, how many programs have been written, so that's how many levels students have played through, and how students are progressing through each unit. All right, so now we are going to go back to the top and go to Lesson Library.
Drum roll, please. Everybody's
We worked so hard on getting this ready in the past few weeks for back to school, so we're super excited about this. So the Lesson Library is great because as the curriculum developer here, it gives us the freedom to collaborate with other teachers and to write coding lessons that include content areas that are not something that we have in our full curriculum. So now we have lessons that include math, ELA, we have a robotics unit, and we have the freedom really to create coding lessons out of any discipline. So we are going to start by looking on the left-hand side under filters. This is kind of a way for you to search as though you were shopping. So if you're online shopping and you know what you're looking for, you typically use a filter, right? You're not going to search for shoes if you're looking for shirts. So this can really help you narrow down your search. We have a lot of lessons and we're going to be adding more. Super excited that teachers can also submit their own lessons. So if you have your own, I'll show you how to do that. But just for this purpose, I really want to show you our new robotics unit. So I'm going to go to Content Area Robotics. And you'll see that it loads our new robotics unit. So we're super excited that we partnered with Wonder Workshop. And
I'm sure you're all fans of Dash and Dot.
Yes, Dash and Dot are now part of the Kodable family. So I will click on our first one just to give you guys a little snippet. So what's great about the lesson library is you can save these lessons. So you'll browse like a catalog. It's not going to show up on your dashboard, these lessons, unless you explicitly search or save them, and you can add them to what you already have via our pacing. So if you've created a second grade class and you're on second grade pacing, you definitely have those lessons saved, but if you want to teach a robotics unit, you can add that to what you already have. So by clicking Save This Lesson, I can then choose a class to save it to. I'm going to save this to our webinar class. And you'll see that it highlights and hovers. When you hover it, it'll highlight and you can save. And now this lesson is saved to our class. So we can add any kind of coding lesson we want, or we can just stick to the Kodable curriculum. I'm going to go back to the lesson library though and show you. So this banner at the top is our featured unit. Obviously it's back to school, so we're featuring back to school lessons. And I want to show these to you because there's a good example of coding lessons that you can teach unplugged your first couple weeks of school. So the new lessons in the lesson library are not linked to game content. So these are, the idea of the lesson library is for coding to be taught every day. And you can do that in a variety of ways, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to spread awareness that coding is everywhere, and also that you can integrate coding into what you're already doing. So we're going to take a look at our first back to school lesson. So this is a kindergarten lesson, but
So I'm going to interrupt you for just
Sure.
1 second. We had a question about the lesson library. Maureen was asking if this is premium only or can anybody access it. So it is free to everybody to use. You'll see I'm going to just go back to it for just a second. You'll see, so lessons that are free to use have no special icon on them. But if I was to click on third grade, you'll see some have Kodable School. So those are our paid lessons. Those are part of our paid curriculum. So anything that doesn't have that icon, you can use completely free and add it to any of your classes.
which is awesome. Okay, so we'll go back to this. It's a kindergarten lesson, just because of the activity that we chose, but you can use this as a template, and you can really run with it and use your own classroom procedures to teach coding in this same way. So I'm going to save this lesson to a kindergarten class because I want to use it for kindergarten. So that will be added to that kindergarten class. So in this lesson, students will be able to follow a sequence of steps related to classroom procedures and programming. So this lesson introduces the concept of sequence and following steps and breaking tasks down into steps. And we used hand washing as an example, but I'm sure that you can think of 100 classroom procedures that you can break down and train students to follow in a sequence and relate to programming. So in this particular lesson, students are following a sequence of steps. They're using those sight words first, next, then, and last, and they're practicing a classroom procedure that will be used every day in their classroom. And the materials that go with it, just like our other lessons, are available for download as well. Do we have a question?
Nope. That's
Great.
I think we're good.
So we'll
And
go
you guys can
back.
feel free to. Oh, we do have a question. Can you save a lesson to multiple classes? You can. Yeah. So say actually you can see.
You can save it to Pinterest too.
Yeah. So Brie was saving this to blue to test, but actually I had already saved it to my blue class. So you can see you can remove it from here as well. So if I wanted to assign it to all of my kindergarten classes, say I would just hover over the next generation and save it to them. And so it's actually saved to all of my kindergarten classes. So I can be sure to go over coding and classroom procedures with all of my kinders. So yes.
Great. So we're going to get into talking about the game and some updates we've made over the summer to the game. But before we do that, I just want to note that the Kodable lessons that exist on your dashboard already as part of our curriculum, you can assign or you can pin and save them, but those are linked to game content. Other lessons in the lesson library are not. So I got a question this week from a teacher who was wondering where the online content was for some of these lesson library lessons, and there's actually not game content. So it's just important to note that if you don't see it listed in the lesson plan, it does not go with specific game content. Although you can have, obviously, your students practice sequence after they do, this hand washing lesson because that makes sense, but it's just not explicitly going to say, do this lesson online. So we are going to move into the game. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Sure. We also have a question from Mum Bugs, who asks if we should. So she has some students who have never been doing any coding before. She didn't say what grade they're in, but she said, should they start at a kindergarten level? And that's a great question and something we get a lot. So actually, I'll share our recommended pacing for your first year of coding in the chat, but we recommend that everyone start at the kindergarten level if you have not done any coding before, and your older students are just going to move at a little bit of an accelerated pace. So they may not need to spend nearly as long learning about sequence as your kindergartners would. However, it is important, just like, if you were learning to read for the first time in 5th grade, you would still need to learn your ABCs, you would need to learn about sentence structure and about the sounds of words and everything like that. So it's the same thing for coding. We need everybody to start from the beginning. So yes, I would suggest starting with the kindergarten content, but if you assign a 5th grade class in Kodable, it will automatically put them on that year 1 pacing, and then it'll just mark things off as you go through Kodable. So eventually they'll get up to the 5th grade content. So yeah, thanks for the question.
Great. So we are going to move to the game content. So if you have students working in the app on an iPad, make sure that you update your apps because we've made a lot of changes and we want you to have access to all the awesome new stuff in our latest release.
Yay!
So update your apps on your iPads. And if you are playing on the web, again, it's game.kodable.com. So you can access the on-screen lessons either way. So we're going to enter our class code. Use a different one. Great. And one recommendation that I do have, which is also a video resource we'll be sharing as a teaching tip, is to make yourself a teacher profile. So I'm on a teacher profile right now, and what that means is every lesson is unlocked already. So if I want to help a student who's in Asteroidia, I don't have to play all the way through Planet Smeeborg to be able to help them with the level that they're on. So I can see what they have access to, and I can hop around and skip around levels and work with students. And it's just super important for teachers to be able to see exactly what it is that students are working on, no matter what level they're at. So I'm going to navigate us over here to our awesome Fuzz in his spaceship, or her, I'm not sure, in their spaceship. And we are going to explore our new ship control panel.
Actually, first, do you mind if we go through like just one level of sequence so
Sure.
people can see?
Yeah.
Just to kind of get everybody familiar with what Kodable looks like if you're just starting out with your students. Say this is your first year teaching. You just taught your first lesson on whether it's hand washing, sequence, the Fuzz Family Frenzy, whatever it may be, and your students are just getting started in the game. When they first log in, they can click play, and it'll take them automatically to the levels that have been assigned to them. You can also take them to the very first level of sequence, and that's where they will be starting. And so what we have them starting out with is just very simple, putting arrows in the correct order to get their fuzz through the maze. And we work them all the way up from this to writing in JavaScript in 5th grade. So going over object-oriented programming with actual syntax and instantiating objects and all kinds of crazy things. And all of your teacher materials will actually explain those concepts to you before you go in to teach your first class. But yeah, so if you're following the Kodable track as far as that pacing guide that I just sent goes, students will start here in a very simple maze, but then it quickly gets more and more difficult and working them up to JavaScript. But we actually have been hard at work adding some creative content, which is what Brie's going to take over talking about. So,
Thank you, Gretchen.
you're
for your
welcome.
piece.
Just for context for those who are new.
So we're going to go back to our new open-ended creative content. So we added 2 new, features here. We have this, I'm hovering over, I don't think you can see my arrow. In the middle, this maze is build your own maze, called our Maze Maker. And then this green pick a fuzz, you can build your own fuzz. We're going to start with Maze Maker. I would recommend using the Maze Maker for K through 2 students and build your own fuzz for upper grade students.
Yes.
That being said, what Gretchen just mentioned about, if upper grade students don't have coding experience, then in this case, I would say Maze Maker. So this is more for beginner coders who have not had experience yet with sequence or conditions or loops and functions, because that is what they'll be doing in Maze Maker. Build your own fuzz has a lot of JavaScript syntax. We talk about variables and properties, and that's much more advanced, and they need this foundation first. So that should be kept in mind with our creative content.
I'm going to pause for 1 second. We've got quite a few questions. So,
Sure.
Maureen asks, do you find that kids need a refresher to get back up to speed, or can they easily pick up where they left off? If you're coming in for the new year and say they haven't been doing any coding over the summer, I would suggest maybe 1 or 2 lessons of refresher. If you look at the different grades for beyond your first year in that pacing guide that I showed you, you can tell it's sort of stacked and scaffolded. So there's about maybe like a half a unit of review on the last concept that they learned in the school year, the year before. But I think you'll find that students pick it up pretty quickly after some light refresher. And then we have a question from Carla, Tracy. Is 7.3.5 the most recent version? I am not certain about that, actually. I will double check for you, Tracy, and I'll post it in the chat. Carla asks, do your students have to save when they exit the game, or does it save for them? So it saves for them. So if you're using the web version and you just have them exit, it will save. And then whenever they come back using their class code, it'll have all of their progress saved. The same with the app. So if you're using Kodable on the iPad, it'll save all of their progress locally on the device, and then when that device is connected to the internet, it'll send it to us, and then anytime they log in with their class code, their progress would be saved. So yes, we save automatically.
Any other questions before we
have a question from 777AANG, and they ask, how do you update the app in iPads? So if you're using Configurator for your school, your IT person will probably be able to set that up for you. It's a way to like mass update all of your iPads. Otherwise, if you go to the App Store, you should be able to see your updates there. It'll tell you how many updates you have. And if it doesn't say that there's an update available for Kodable, then you're on the latest version.
Great. All right, so we're going to get back to Maze Maker. Again, it's best for beginners who are looking to build that foundation, and it's awesome for assessment. So if you want to test what your students can do, this is a great way to have them build their own problems and solve their own problems. So it's almost like they're working backwards, and we'll get into that. It's also super fun and visually appealing, so that's another added bonus. We're going to pick an awesome binary code background.
Kids love also creating mazes and challenging one another. We had some kids in the office who were having a blast making unsolvable mazes for each other.
And so just like our curriculum is scaffolded, students will not be able to add loops and functions until they're there in the game. So this will unlock the Maze Maker, what's the word I'm looking for? Elements will unlock as they move through the curriculum.
Right. So
we're going to start by dragging some tiles. I'm not really thinking this out, which I don't recommend because students should be thinking critically and planning it. This is just going to be a simple example. And then I can add some awesome decorations as I please. And then I can lay out the star path. So the stars mean the maze has to be solved correctly. Oops. Misclicked. So if I were to place a star in a more complex puzzle that wasn't the best way to solve the maze, then all 3 stars would not be earned, which means I didn't solve this puzzle most efficiently. This is a basic puzzle though. This up here, this pink button, I don't think you can see me hovering over it. Click on it, is the eraser, just in case you need to erase. So once we build our maze, I'm going to add one condition tile as well. We can test it. So we need to go right, down.
So you can see this is sort of similar to the game that I was showing you earlier if you're new to Kodable. This is sort of just a play on our classic maze puzzle game. And in this particular maze that Brie has created, we're learning all about sequence.
And a little bit about conditions. So here, there's a pink condition tile. So what this means is if I hit a pink tile, then I go right. So I have to put our condition down and then the arrow on top. And now we'll test our maze. Did I do that?
Hooray!
And so we created and solved a maze, and we can save that. So I'm going to go back, just for time's sake, and see if there are any questions about Maze Maker before we move on to building our own fuzz. Or no?
Let's see, we have a question from Jane Malone Miller. Are the lessons with Bee-Bot or Blue-Bot robots? They are with Dash and Dot robots, which are from Wonder Workshop. But the way that Brie wrote them was intended for them to be easily adaptable to whatever robots you have in your classroom. So they were specifically designed for Dash and Dot, but say you have Bee-Bots or some other robot in your classroom, say a Sphero or something, I think you could easily adapt it to solve the same type of puzzle.
It would take a little work to adapt it, a little bit of time, just because the Wonder Workshop app and robots are used, and they're going to be different from B-bots and things like that, but the actual content and teaching is totally applicable to any robot. So the activities use those robots. That might be where you need to switch it up a little, but the actual instruction, I think, will apply. All right, so we are going to...
One more question from Tracy Williams. Do you recommend starting over each year? My first grade students moved really quickly last year, and most have done all of Smeeborg and Asteroidia. I don't feel like they are ready for Bookworld. Yes, first graders, I don't recommend putting into Bookworld unless you have one or two in your class who you feel are like totally ready for that. It is definitely a fifth grade concept, especially if you're not teaching the content. Like if you're not planning on using the lessons and you just want them going through the game, it is not recommended. It's pretty complicated stuff. I mean, they're writing JavaScript. So I would say holding off on that until they're in third, fourth, or fifth grade. It's definitely an upper elementary type of content. You're actually going to see it a little bit here with our Fuzz creator, some of the JavaScript that we use in Kodable.
So when we hit build here, this is directly related to Bookworld. So this is JavaScript. Classes and objects and properties are all JavaScript and part of object-oriented programming. So we're going to name our class, and this is exactly how you would do this in JavaScript. We're going to name this webinar class. And when we click this check mark, this is JavaScript syntax. So
you mean to do it? Okay. So what we're doing is we are creating our fuzz. So to get started making our fuzz, we need to construct our fuzz. So you can see our constructor here. We're going to add a body to our fuzz, and we can actually modify this property, which is another concept that we cover in Bookworld. So we're going to say this is our body, and the body property is pink. So then we need to add eyes. So the eyes property for our webinar fuzz are going to be green gray. And we have to add a mouth. So the mouth property for this fuzz right now is going to be cheese.
those are values.
Yeah. So the property value for this is going to be cheese. So then we have a function for getting dressed. So what we would do is we would add a mohawk, and let's add some glasses. Party glasses. So our webinar fuzz is ready to party, and all of these concepts that you see here in this JavaScript are part of Bookworld, and they are all covered in the lesson plans on object-oriented programming and JavaScript. You can access all of the information from your teacher dashboard, and your teacher materials cover all of these things that I just mentioned, like classes and objects and values and properties. Everything that we said here, functions, they're all covered in that content. So you can feel totally prepared when you're explaining it to your students what exactly is going on here.
And I guess I would use this opportunity to stress the importance of actually teaching unplugged before getting students onto this. So I would not have students, I wouldn't even show them the open-ended content until they've learned what they're doing. Because this can be fun and great and it looks pretty and kids love it, but if they don't know what it is and what they're doing, then it really does lose its value. So I would hold off on introducing this until you've taught these concepts to your students.
Unless you're taking, just an explore to learn type approach. But then again, coming back to the lessons after they've explored it is really important so that they have the vocabulary to talk about and articulate what they're doing.
Do we have questions?
It looks like John is in the process of answering some
Awesome.
questions. Let's see here. I don't think I see any questions that haven't been answered. So, okay.
Yeah.
Let's see here. game updates. So the last thing that we want to cover, oh yeah, let's go back to our faces. Hi, we're back. So the last thing that we want to say is that we have tons and tons of resources available for you all. We spent the summer kind of going through everything and making sure that it's easily accessible from a few different locations, as well as making sure that it's updated and ready to go for the new year. So a great place to go for information and articles about everything that we've covered here actually is our Help Center. And you can access that from support.kodable.com. Brie and I and John all write articles there. Whenever we feel like there's something that we've been answering a lot of questions to, we'll put them there. Also, if we have new features that we want to make sure everyone understands, we'll put articles there. Another great resource is our blog. So that's blog.kodable.com. I know we have really creative URLs. And you can find helpful articles there as well as updates on Kodable and what we're doing and what we're working on. Right now we have a contest going for the Year of Code. You can tell us your coding challenge for yourself for the year, and we'll check in with people randomly throughout the year, and if you're on track, then you can win prizes for your class. So that's a good place to stay tuned to like know what's going on with Kodable, what our updates are, and things like that. The last place that I would suggest checking if you have questions about Kodable is YouTube. We do a lot of tutorials and tips, as well as like product tours and things like that on our YouTube channel. You're probably on it right now watching this, so you're familiar with it. But yeah, I would definitely suggest poking around at some of our videos. We have videos for every single concept that we teach in Kodable, including sequence, conditions, but also covering classes and variables and properties. So all of these things that we've mentioned are covered in a multitude of places.
We did have one question
Sure.
about coding terms and simplifying definitions for kids. And you were just mentioning some of our resources, and I think our teacher overviews have videos, and they're actually meant for adults or for teachers. They're not the most kid-friendly. They're just not that fun, I guess. But I think there are a lot of visuals in those videos that may be helpful for kids to understand, especially conditions. And I would definitely recommend checking out our back to school lessons. We have a lesson on conditions and conditional statements that really relates these programming terms to real life. And I think that's the best way to help kids understand programming definitions is to talk about them in ways that relate to things around them. And that's what we try to do in some of our teacher materials and those videos. So you may find that helpful.
Is this the question you're answering?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Awesome. I was just reading
Yeah.
through the chat.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for us? I know we've gone through a lot tonight, but I want to make sure to answer any questions that may have come up. We've tried pretty hard to answer as they've been coming, but we'll wait a couple of minutes to see if there's any more.
And while we're waiting, actually, I did also want to show
So we have one question.
okay.
Tracy asks, do you think you will be adding more levels to the paid version, just more of the same concept? We are planning to add more to Bookworld, and we are focusing the rest of the year on creative content. So we've had a lot of feedback from people saying that they love our linear game content, but that they're wanting more free, open-ended content to let kids kind of practice the concepts that they've been learning. So we're really focusing on that for the next year. But there will be more Bookworld content coming hopefully soon. Okay, great. Okay, we'll wait a couple more minutes and see if there's any other questions. And Brie wanted to show.
I just wanted to show if you have a great idea for teaching a certain concept or including coding in anything, you can submit a lesson. And I just wanted to show you where to do that. So this orange Submit My Lesson button will just bring you to a Google form where you can tell us a little bit about your lesson and whatever you can fill in. If we can create a lesson out of that, even if you just have an idea, fantastic. We want to hear, any ideas, or even if you have full lessons, we'd love you to submit them so that we can add them to our awesome lesson library and share it with your friends.
Okay, so I've got a couple questions here. Maureen asks, do you find that the 5th graders pick up the syntax quickly? Drives me crazy. Is there a way that syntax errors are highlighted? So the way that our syntax works is it types out most of it for them. So we remove some of the frustration of like, oh, I've missed a semicolon, or I missed a period, or I'm missing a character, so that they can really just select the value that they want from a drop down. So they'll see all of the syntax, they just won't actually have to type it, which is really nice for students who are still learning their typing skills. So syntax errors kind of eliminated from the whole thing, which is really nice. And if you're going over the vocabulary with them, you should find that they start to pick up the syntax pretty well, because that's all covered in the lessons. So you'll be talking about it together in class.
And I think, like, most of our material is pretty scaffolded. We don't just throw them into the syntax. They're seeing it first before they're manipulating it, and then eventually they'll be writing it. But it's pretty gradual, and yeah, it builds on itself.
Tracy Williams asks, can you lock the Create a Fuzz part of Ship Control Panel? No, you can't right now, but that is something Brie's been advocating for since the moment we created it.
I taught kindergarten and 1st grade, so I'm saying we should lock it.
Yeah, and I have a feeling with the start of the school year, we'll start getting more and more requests for that. So hopefully soon we'll be able to add that for you guys. Stacy Blower asks, do you think there are enough lessons for an entire year with the free option? So there are about 12 lessons, 12 weeks of lessons, and that really depends on how in-depth you want to go with coding.
In the library.
And in the library is more like supplemental things, or if there's special occasions, or
mini
back to school, mini lessons, things like that. I think we have an Earth Day lesson in there. But yeah, it really depends on how in-depth you want to go. If you guys are just exploring and you're figuring out this whole coding thing and you're just getting started, absolutely. Like, figure out if Kodable is the right thing for you. Figure out if it's something you want to continue teaching with. But if you're ready to sort of go in-depth with your students and you really want them prepared at the end of elementary school to be writing apps and games and websites and creating things in middle school, then I would say it'd be worth exploring the paid content, because we have now over 70 weeks of lessons. You can really have a whole year's worth of content to teach your students and make sure that they're prepared for middle school. So if that's something you're interested in, you can always reach out to either me or Brie, or support@kodable.com, and we can set up a quick chat with you, getting to know sort of your coding goals, what you're trying to achieve in your school, and really get to know like your special situation, and make a recommendation on what plan would be right for you, go over some of our pricing options, and cover all that you would get with the school plan. So Kate Melito asks, I know each new grade level starts with a review from last year. Does this reset student progress, or will it show those? I think, Kate, what you're asking is, does it reset student progress if you do those reviews? It will not delete their previous attempts in the game. It will just add more attempts to that progress. So it'll say last attempted, and it'll say they've attempted it, 5 times, however many times they've completed it, and it'll show their highest score on that level. So say they reviewed it and they did better than they did last year, it'll show that high score. Tracy Williams asks, can teachers make their own maze in the Build Your Maze and share it with students? Yes, you can absolutely create your own maze. We're working on adding a sharing feature, actually, that's next on our agenda for the year. So hopefully sometime in September or October, that will be released to you guys to start sharing. It'll be between classes, within classes. So students in your class will have access to mazes that were created by students in your class or by you, and not like with the world. Jesus Saves Me Through and Through asks how to record students' progress if they are doing it manually as they do not yet have tablets. That's a great question, actually. We don't have any way of recording. It is really nice. A coding portfolio of all of their work, which is really nice for them to take home at the end of the school year and sort of show their parents. The other thing that's really important is parent engagement. Parents just love seeing what their kids are learning at school, and the kids love showing them and kind of being the expert on this new concept that they just learned. So that's another great way. Android version. So I can't see your username, but we had an Android version, and unfortunately, since we are such a small team, I don't know if you all know, but we're 5 people, and so we were not able to support it, and we didn't want to keep it out there with it being not a great experience. We also didn't have a ton of people using Android devices in the classroom, and so unfortunately we had to pull it from the Google Play Store, but it is something that we want to eventually put back out there once we're able to support it. So hopefully soon. Buy Kodable School and we can hire more people. Yeah, I think that is all of the questions. Yeah, great. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for sticking with us through the technical
Sorry
difficulties.
about the beginning.
Again, if you're planning on using Wirecast Play, maybe not.
Explore other options.
But anyway, so have a really great start to your school year, and feel free to reach out to us anytime, support.kodable.com, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Happy back to school.
Yay! See ya.